last part of the slides for writing for media and our snow day recording. So at the end, I just want to talk a little bit about editing and rewriting, what technically are the differences, although we'll probably, class them kind of together, but talk a little bit about some of the kind of harder parts of writing that we maybe don't talk about. And the focus on making our writing better is going to be what we kind of focus on when we look at Fridays going forward. So editing technically is looking at spelling, grammar, and style mistakes, changing up verbs, and making sure that we cut down on our wordiness. So why is it so important to make sure that we get our editing done? And that we don't just kind of take everything out of our head, put it on paper, and just leave it? Well, make sure that you don't have any really basic spelling, grammar, and style mistakes. This is part of why I want to make sure that we have our kind of AP style sprinkled throughout the whole course. They can be embarrassing if they make it into the final product, both for you and for the person who publishes your work. And because of the fact they're embarrassing for the person who publishes your work, it can be harmful for you as a writer. You don't want your boss to think that you don't pay attention to those details, because those details are really important. So let's go ahead and use all the tools at our disposal to catch these, especially like spelling mistakes and basic grammar mistakes, using something like Grammarly, making sure that you use the spell check and the grammar check that's built into things like Word and Google Docs. Really helpful. Yes, it's not going to catch everything, but it'll catch the big stuff. And in some cases, you can actually set it to tell it what style you're using. We're using AP. But this is also why you want other people to read your work. What it's not going to catch is the fact that you left out the word "the" in the middle of a sentence. Your brain has a tendency to fill in these gaps that it knows should be filled in, especially if it's something that you've worked on for a while. You know what you mean to say, and so your brain reads it the way you meant it. When you have other people read your work, another tip, if you don't have a chance to have someone read your work or you don't have someone handy, read it out loud. Then you don't fill it in. This allows us to catch those things that our eye just glosses over and our brain fills in. It's something everybody does. I do it too. Every professional will tell you that they have somebody else look at their work before it's published. This is why editors exist in the writing cycle. You need that to catch these things before it gets to print. When it gets to print, that's the problem. Now, what are some other kind of tips and tricks you can use to punch up your writing, make it a little bit stronger? Well, the quickest way to improve your writing is to look at the verbs you're using. Use active voice. Again, that kind of like putting it into something that is not passive. You want it to be, draw the reader on, and using verbs that are action verbs. It's inherently more interesting. So look through your writing and see how you've used verbs, and if there's maybe a better verb you can use, or if you can change the kind of the voice or the tense so that it's more active. Now, I am very guilty of being wordy. And this is a major and consistent problem across the board for everybody. Again, it's not just you. We put our ideas down, but then we need to refine those ideas, hone them like you're whittling a knife. And so this is where this kind of editing and revision process is so important. And this leads us really well into rewriting. Now, rewriting is when you've got everything down and you're going to move things around and you're going to say, okay, this sentence doesn't work. So again, it's not just wordiness within each sentence, but is that sentence necessary? You want to make sure that you answer all of the questions that the reader has. Again, you want to make sure by the end they know what the takeaway is and that you're consistent within your piece of writing. Again, making sure that things agree from beginning to end. And so technically, that's kind of where the differences are. All of this is kind of part of a rewriting process, a process where you're editing your work and working on it. So in terms of answering all the questions, make sure that you've done a complete job gathering the information. You have all the information to give the reader. And how do you tell when the information is incomplete? This is a question I would have asked you in class, but think about for yourself. When you're reading the piece, and again, you're very familiar with it, so this is where sometimes somebody from the outside can be helpful. Are there things that pop to mind, like when you read your lead, that are questions that you want answered? And then you want to check when you finished writing your story, have you in fact gotten to all of them? Is there something that's unresolved? And your article should, of course, make sense, especially when you're structuring things in a specific way. Make sure that, again, from the beginning to the end, you tell a coherent story. Even if you need to structure things in a way that's most important to next most important, make sure that you bring in transitions, that you have things flow in a way that the reader understands what's happening. And again, this might be where you need to bring in some chronology words so that if you are not presenting information in chronological order, in the order that it happened, then you make it clear to the reader what that order is. This is most important, but it happened after this other thing. So make sure that by the end, it's really clear to the reader what they should be taking away. Which kind of gets to what some of the big challenges are when you're approaching writing. And hopefully we're going to address most of these throughout the course. Gathering that information, making sure you have all the facts. That's pretty hard to do. That's work in and of itself. That's research. So again, making sure that you spend your time, if you are especially working on a longer piece of writing, you need to devote that kind of pre-writing, pre-production time, making sure that you have all the facts so that you can then give them to the reader in a way that's appropriate, which is where we get to our appropriate structures and writing conventions. So in a lot of these writing prompts, especially in the kind of lower risk challenges that we're going to be looking at, making sure that we experiment with all these different forms so we have some practice in each of them. So like this week, we're looking at the inverted pyramid. So what is that writing convention like? How do we do it? And that's all going to help enhance your writing across the board. If you get good at writing different ways, you kind of get good at writing in all of the ways when you bring them all together.